Welcome to the press conference with Minister Blair. Bienvenue à cette conférence de presse avec le ministre.
Welcome to this press conference with Minister Blair.
Good morning, everyone. Bon matin, tout le monde. I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. I apologize for being a few minutes late. My flight was delayed. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And I'm pleased today to be joined by our very trusted partners from the Canadian Red Cross, from St. John's Ambulance, the Salvation Army, and the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada, as we make what we believe to be an important announcement today. As we have already seen, 2023 has become Canada's worst wildfire season on record. There are currently close to 900 wildfires burning across the country, and over half are determined to be out of control. An area roughly nearly the size of Newfoundland has already burned so far this year. It is a stark reminder that the frequency and severity of climate-related disasters are growing each year, but we are grateful for all those supporting the firefighting, evacuation, and relief efforts throughout the country. And the humanitarian organizations today play a key role in that response. Canadians have seen them step up throughout this challenging wildfire season, from local search and rescue teams assisting with evacuation efforts to opening shelters and providing food, clothing, and compassion to those with nowhere else to go. And they have done so during countless other emergencies, from the 2021 floods in British Columbia to Hurricane Fiona last September, and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, just to name a few recent examples. Their boots on the ground, largely volunteer-driven actions have saved lives and helped many, many Canadians. The Government of Canada is proud to support this essential work through the Supporting a Humanitarian Workforce to Respond to COVID-19 and Other Large-Scale Emergencies program. And that's why today, I am very pleased to announce that the Government of Canada is providing new funding in the form of $82 million so that these organizations can continue to be there for Canadians in their times of greatest need. The funding from this program will help these organizations recruit and maintain a highly skilled and qualified group of workers who can rapidly deploy on short notice to support the response to emergency situations. It will also allow them to train new personnel, to purchase equipment and supplies, and to adapt protocols and procedures to address the needs of specific communities. With today's announcement, the Government of Canada has provided a total of $166.9 million in funding under this program to help the non-government organizations respond to disasters and to serve their fellow Canadians in crisis. Already, these organizations have put this funding to great use. And as an example, the Canadian Red Cross has completed cultural awareness training to better support Indigenous communities, in addition to maintaining a workforce of thousands of rapid first responders. St. John's Ambulance is expanding its emergency response volunteer resources, including staffing for volunteer recruitment and training. The Salvation Army has procured 2,000 deployment kits for volunteer responders, and SARVAC, the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada, is optimizing their structure and processes so that they can more rapidly deploy volunteers across the country. This increased capacity will better support Canadians during and after disasters, helping to build resilience, and they are a key pillar to mitigating the effects of climate change. It will also help relieve pressure on other organizations, including the Canadian Armed Forces, who we often call upon to help during emergencies. Strengthening Canada's humanitarian organizations is just one step that our government is taking towards sustaining emergency readiness and response capacity. The Government of Canada is committed to continuing to engage with provinces, territories, Indigenous partners, NGOs, and other stakeholders as we work to build a pan-Canadian, whole-of-society approach to civilian response in emergencies. And we are grateful to be able to rely on the organizations that are here with us today and many other local organizations who continue to be there when Canadians need them most. Thank you very much. Merci. And I will now turn to my Parliamentary Secretary, Stéphane Lauzon, for remarks.
Thanks, Minister Blair. Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. As the Minister noted, 2023 is the worst wildfire season ever recorded in Canada, and we are only halfway through. More than 900 wildfires are currently active in Canada, and over half have been determined to be out of control. We are talking about a surface area as large as Newfoundland, which has already been burned this year. These events are becoming more and more frequent, and we are examining ways to strengthen our whole of Canada civilian response capacity. We are now seeing flooding and wildfires happening in Quebec at the same time. There is no one better place to lead our efforts than the people with us today, our partners with the Canadian Red Cross, St. John Ambulance, the Salvation Army, and the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada. Their work has already played a key role in responding to some of Canada's most devastating disasters. During the 2021 British Columbia floods, Hurricane Fiona last September, or in our long-term care homes during the darkest days of the COVID-19 pandemic, skilled, selfless individuals stepped up and served their fellow Canadians. We owe them our gratitude, and we know we will always be able to count on them. I am proud to join this announcement today, where we announce additional funding of $82 million. This will allow these organizations to continue to be there for Canadians in crisis. The funding will help these organizations recruit and maintain a highly skilled and qualified group of workers who can rapidly deploy on short notice to support the response to emergency events. It will also allow them to train new personnel, purchase equipment and supplies, and adapt protocols and procedures to address the needs of specific communities. With today's announcement, the Government of Canada has provided a total of $166.9 million in funding under this program to help these NGOs respond to disasters and serve their fellow Canadians in crisis. This increased capacity will better support Canadians during and after disasters, helping to build resilience, a key pillar of mitigating the effects of climate change. Strengthening Canadian humanitarian organizations is just one step our government is taking towards sustaining emergency readiness and response capacity so that we can keep Canadians safe. Thank you for your attention, and I will now be yielding the floor to Janelle Coltz, President of the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada.
My name is Janelle Coltz, and I'm the President of the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada. We represent over 9,000 volunteer search and rescue personnel in approximately 300 communities in every province and territory. I would like to begin by thanking the Government of Canada, and in particular Minister Blair, for being a tremendous partner as we work towards bolstering national resilience and readiness in the face of disasters that are increasing in size and frequency across Canada. This funding allows us to leverage the experience and skill sets of our members and utilize those on a national basis. Our focus is on increasing capacity to provide rapid emergency management response for large-scale events, as well as sustainable responses in small, remote, and marginalized communities. A significant value of SARVAC as a disaster response organization is its decentralized and geographic disbursement of members across Canada. SARVAC is focusing on the dissemination of new capabilities to its provincial and territorial associations and to their respective local search and rescue teams. SARVAC can deliver a wide variety of capabilities that are derived from being trained search and rescue personnel. We are professional volunteer responders experienced in working within a command and control structure and capable of working in hazardous environments. We are thankful and excited to be working together with our fellow NGOs as we collectively increase our capacity to serve and support Canadians during future emergencies. It is thanks to this funding and the support from the Government of Canada that we are able to serve Canadians in times of need. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Blair, Parliamentary Secretary Lauzon. I'm very pleased to be here with the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary and alongside my colleagues from the Salvation Army, St. John Ambulance, and Search and Rescue Volunteers Association of Canada. I'm pleased
to be here with the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary, as well as my colleagues from the other humanitarian organizations.
The work of the Canadian Red Cross responding to large-scale disasters and emergencies was largely overseas. Events like the Indonesian earthquake and the tsunami and the Haiti earthquake were representative of the majority of our efforts in disaster response and recovery. Large events in Canada were seen as the exception and occurred infrequently. Manitoba flooding, the ice storm in eastern Canada in the late 1990s, Kelowna fires in 2003. They were devastating disasters, but they were also seen as exceptional. Then things rapidly changed. The Calgary floods, Fort McMurray wildfires, BC fires, floods in Quebec and Ontario, hurricanes in Atlantic Canada. The vast majority of the Canadian Red Cross response efforts are now domestically focused, supporting impacted Canadians. Disasters and emergencies in Canada are increasing in frequency, severity, and complexity, as the Minister mentioned in his opening remarks, and we can no longer treat these events as exceptional. We must increase our standing capacity to respond to events in Canada, and thanks to this ongoing investment by the Government of Canada, we can better maintain our readiness capacity. Nous devons nous adapter à cette nouvelle réalité.
We need to adapt to this new reality. To do so, we will need to increase our readiness and increase our intervention capacities so that we can address disasters and other disruptive events. Thanks to continued support from the government, the government is contributing significantly to our adaptation work. The Canadian Red Cross will be more able to deploy rapidly when emergencies take place in Canada. We must be ready to mobilize humanitarian resources to areas in need.
Been deployed at critical times throughout COVID-19 and more recently in response to Hurricane Fiona and the fires that continue to burn across the country. This has provided vital support to the response and recovery work in our communities. While this program funding is very important, it's not a singular solution to the needs that must be met. First and foremost, preparedness starts at the individual and community level. Ensemble, nous pouvons nous adapter et répondre à cette nouvelle réalité.
Together, we must come together to adapt to this new reality with an increased level of extreme climate events and other disruptive events. We need to address the needs of vulnerable communities and get ready for the next emergency.
We can adapt and respond to our new realities of increasing climate-driven disasters and other disruptive events. We must learn from each emergency and adapt, and we can support those most vulnerable in our communities as we can better prepare for the next emergency. Today's announcement of continued funding for the Humanitarian Workforce Program is a critical contribution towards this culture of preparedness. Thank you. Merci.
Let me say thank you to the government and to Minister Blair in particular for your support and trust in the Salvation Army as a dependable partner. I would also like to express my gratitude to our dedicated partner responders. The Salvation Army is actively involved in 400 communities across Canada where we serve individuals in need on a daily basis. During times of disaster or emergency, we witness people enduring what is often the most challenging day of their lives. In these moments, we bring our unique talents and skills, collaborating with our partner NGOs to provide assistance and relief. Just as in life, when we combine our resources and expertise, we are stronger together. The announced funds will aid the Salvation Army in expanding our volunteer base. They will enable us to enhance our network of emergency responders, ensuring our readiness to provide aid in locations like High Prairie, Alberta, Shelburne, Nova Scotia, Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. We appreciate your partnership as it empowers us to offer hope to those confronting seemingly hopeless situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Blair. Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Heureux d'être ici en présence avec tout le monde, avec nos partenaires.
Happy to be here with everyone, our partners, Minister Blair.
As our country faces the worst wildfire season in history, I first want to thank our emergency response teams and dedicated volunteers who have rapidly mobilized to support their fellow Canadians. My thoughts are with the communities who are continuing to face wildfires and families whose lives and homes have been significantly affected by them. Volunteer emergency responders play a crucial role in Canada's ability to respond to natural disasters. Thanks to previous humanitarian workforce funding, St. John Ambulance volunteers are equipped with the necessary training, equipment, and supplies to rapidly deploy to large-scale emergencies when called upon. Today's funding announcement by the Government of Canada is a welcome investment that will enable St. John Ambulance to increase its emergency health service capabilities across Canada. We wish to thank Public Safety Canada and Minister Blair for this funding. As communities from coast to coast face more frequent and severe natural disasters, this additional funding is crucial in ensuring our country is prepared to rapidly mobilize and respond to large-scale emergencies. The emergency health service offered by St. John Ambulance include medical first response, psychosocial support, such as therapy dog services and mental health assistance, to care for both physical and mental health needs of people impacted by emergencies and disasters. St. John Ambulance is dedicated to emergency management and expanding its number of volunteer emergency responders. Today's funding will allow us to build on our existing network of over 10,000 volunteers in over 300 communities and continue to be there when and where Canadians need us most. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. This concludes our prepared remarks. I'd also like to take the opportunity. In the very many years I've been involved, first of all, as a first responder and now as a minister of our government, we know the 4 organizations that are here with us this morning. We know them well. They've always been there for Canadians. And Canadians know them well because they're from their communities. And they are always, have been, and for many years, have been there in response. We recognize the importance of these organizations to their communities. And we also believe that by supporting them and assisting them in creating greater capacity, they can do even more in helping Canadians through what has become, as Conrad has shared with us, some very challenging times in our recent past. We believe by strengthening this capacity right across the country in every community of Canada, will help keep Canadians safer and also help them be better prepared for the increased frequency and severity of these weather-related events. And we're happy now to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. We'll now start the question period. As a reminder, 1 question and 1 follow-up. Nous allons maintenant débuter la période de questions.
We'll now begin the question period. Quick reminder, 1 question, 1 follow-up. Those on Zoom may use the raised hand function.
Use the raise hand function. We'll start in the room with Mia Reption, Canadian Press.
Just wondering if any of the organizations could be a bit more specific about how you will use this funding, what's missing now and what this funding will allow you to do.
I think this is, for us, it's a continuity. As I mentioned, we ramped up quite a bit our capacity during COVID in support of the government. We're coming in out of COVID in another reality, which is a rise of these events. So this is really increasing our standing capacity. I think we need to be ready. It used to be we had seasonal events and exceptional events. Now we're seeing more and more frequency. So we need more standing capacity. We need to be more ready. We need to have more volunteers and so on and so forth. So this is really supporting this.
Has there been a change in the skill set or the responses that you need to do now versus what you did 5, 10, 15 years ago?
I'll leave somebody else.
Absolutely, for search and rescue, it's become something that is more prevalent in our society. All of our teams have always helped with hands-on when it comes to emergency response and when we're there and locally being able to help. But now we're looking at increasing that capability to be able to help across the province or across Canada. So we're looking at additional training, having things ready for rapid deployment kits, for example, so that each area of our province and territories is going to have what we need available to be able to respond to these emergencies as they happen. So it's something we've been building on for a number of years. Of course, our base has always been search and rescue, and that may be for a single person, but when it comes to some of these large-scale events, we're hands-on, and that's something that's been increasing.
Thank you, Campbell.
Just, if I can add, I think one is what we've seen is an increase. Certainly, the response, of course, the volume in terms of response, the complexity of recovery is a whole area. The journey that Canadians go when they lose everything in terms of going back to the normal state. This is in a context, and we're seeing with a lot of the work in many of the provinces with the scarcity of housing, of low-cost housing available, as well as people are displaced. I think this is a new reality that has increased quite a bit, and of course compounded is all the psychosocial impact as well on Canadians that have been evacuated for longer periods. The new reality of this summer as well, which is new in terms of the fire season, it's hard to say what is the season. It started earlier. I mean, we used to take an event, you know the beginning and you know the end. This summer, we're not quite sure when it ends, and we're seeing some communities being evacuated, returning, and evacuated again, right? There may be a lot more fires which is a new reality that we're seeing this year.
Thank you. Campbell Clark.
Minister, Germany has a broad-based technical relief volunteer organization that handles disaster relief of all kinds. Why doesn't Canada?
Thank you. It's an important question. We're looking at what everyone is doing in response to this, because we're seeing globally an increase in the frequency and severity of these events, and certainly that's been our experience in Canada. But it's also important, I think, to look very carefully at the Canadian context and look at the organizations that already exist in this country and how we can build up capacity within those. And as I've already indicated, the Canadian Red Cross, Search and Rescue, Volunteers Association, Salvation Army, and St. John's are already well-established organizations, trusted organizations in this country. And so our experience, as an example, during COVID, when we were asked by the provinces of Ontario and Quebec to provide additional assistance from the federal government in their long-term care facilities, initially we deployed Canadian Armed Forces personnel. And although they did an exceptional job, as they always do when we call upon them, it was very impactful on the Canadian Armed Forces to deploy those resources. And in many of the circumstances, it wasn't necessarily the skill set that was required. And so we turned to the volunteer organizations represented here today, and particularly the Canadian Red Cross, and we asked them to provide volunteers and trained volunteers that could provide the support services that were needed in those facilities. We made some investment at that time in capacity building and recruitment training of the volunteers, and they did an exceptional job for us. And so we are constantly looking at ways in which we can serve Canadians in these types of events. And as we've seen over the past several years, with an increase in severity and frequency of these events, more is being required of us. On the Canadian Armed Forces, as I've said, I received the request for assistance from across the country. Many of those requests are directed towards Canadian Armed Forces response, but that isn't in every case the best response, and it certainly shouldn't be the only response. And so we are looking at a number of ways to build up civilian capacity. We believe that the most appropriate way to deal with that is to tap into those existing NGOs that already serve Canadians and have a long history and are trusted within our communities, and then to invest in them to make sure that they have the capacity to continue to do even more as we call upon them to assist communities in these events.
Minister, since you're here today, there's been a controversy going around for, well, a question still in the air for months now. The CSIS director told a committee that he had sent an issues management note to your office when you were public safety minister with information that he wanted you to have. You told the same committee that you never received a briefing on that CSIS should have briefed it. But the CSIS director was quite clear that that information was sent to the minister's attention, and that it was such issues management notes are sent on a rare but regular basis to the minister's attention, and that you should have received it. So this is pretty confusing to us. Can you please give us a simple explanation for why that issues management note never got to the minister's attention?
Certainly. And I work very closely with the CSIS director. On a regular basis, I would meet with him and he would brief me on matters of importance, usually in a secure facility. And because it's top secret information is dealt with in that way. In this case, a memo was sent that was authorized for my attention, but unfortunately it was not sent to my office. It was sent to a secure device, not located in my office, but in somewhere else, that I had no access to, no one in my office had access to, and no one in my office was ever made aware that there was a memo.
So who made that mistake and sent it to the place that you and your staff did not have? Was this public safety officials sent it to the wrong place, or a place that you didn't have access to and your staff didn't have access?
All I can say is under normal circumstances, the director of CSIS would bring such matters to my attention. I was at actually hither.
But you haven't said how that, the director of CSIS said it was for your attention. That's the way they sent management notes to your attention. So who didn't give it to you?
Well, and to make sure it was brought to my attention, I would have required that I be aware. It was a top secret memo that I did not know existed. Someone would have had to either advise me or my office that it existed. That advice never arrived, and so we weren't aware of its existence. And so clearly, and I think it's been well established that there was a breakdown in the way in which this information should be shared. Frankly, it was information I would have very much wanted to be aware of. And had I been notified that such information existed, I would have sought it
But
out.
where did it go wrong?
Well, it clearly went wrong between CSIS's intention, and I've no doubt the director fully intended that I see it, and it actually being brought to my attention or even to the attention of anyone in my office so it could be brought to me. That breakdown did occur, and those are things that require remedy. And I understand that steps have now been taken to remedy that.
I'm sorry, but how can we know what steps are taken to remedy that if you can't tell us where the breakdown occurred? If you can't say the public safety officials who were supposed to print this off and show it to you have now been told to show it to you. We don't know who.
CSIS had top secret information that they felt that I should see. And clearly the process that they had in place to bring it to my attention was not complete and did not bring it to my office's attention, and that's now been remedied.
Thank you. Next question, Christy Girl. Yeah.
This question is for Mr. Sauvé, I believe, with the Red Cross. Over the last year, a couple of provinces have asked the Red Cross to hand out money on their behalf. I'm wondering if you welcome that expansion of your mandate, and if so, if this additional funding is enough, should there be more instances like that in the coming year?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think there's an evolution both in Canada actually and internationally in terms of direct cash assistance as being one of the best way to support people immediately. And we initiated this actually in Fort McMurray ourselves. And now the provinces have asked us to manage sometimes on their behalf. Sometimes they do it themselves. So we're playing a role on the continuum, and we do definitely welcome this. The cash assistance, the immediate cash assistance is both financial support, but also it's an ability to understand what the needs are of people that are affected. And, you know, again, if you look at a disaster response, we're working in Nova Scotia right now, or in any province, you go from people that are evacuated for a few weeks and have no damage to those who have lost their homes completely. So that initial assessment's important. So we do welcome this role of cash assistance. And as I said, on the continuum as well, going to recovery as well, where we're playing a role in supporting in recovery. And we're also sharing the best practices across the country to help support how we're going to work here. And I think the other challenge, of course, is the journey to recovery. That's an important one as well. But cash, and remembering as well that the majority of people will go to friends and family. A small amount of people will go to shelter. And again, a lot of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, so that immediate assistance is critical as fast as possible.
Yeah, if I may also respond to that. On behalf of the provinces and ourselves and the federal government, we work very closely. We've all recognized the importance of being able to get money out to communities and to people who need it in the immediate, to deal with food and shelter and other immediate needs. I wanted to acknowledge how important the Red Cross has become in that, because they not only provide experience, but they provide the ability to administer this. They register people. They record this information. They actually have created systems that enable both provincial and federal government together to be accountable for how public dollars are spent and dispersed, to make sure that people in need actually receive this money, but there's a proper accounting and oversight of how those expenditures are done. It's a very important utility that the Red Cross has offered to the provinces and territories, and it's one of the reasons you see in the very early hours of these events, provinces and the federal government often announce together a joint matching fund with the Red Cross, because it is, I think, an expression of our trust that the Red Cross does an exceptional job in administering this. And it's not easy, by the way, because these are people in crisis, and there are often difficulties in communication in these types of events. But the Red Cross has proven exceptionally capable in managing these, and they've earned the trust of the provinces and the federal government in administering that program.
Would be what kind of risk assessment is done when that volume of public money is given to a non-government organization? Like, what kind of discussion is there around that?
Well, first of all, it's a partnership, and so it's matching funds from both. As the Red Cross will receive donations from generous Canadians from across the country in the aftermath of these events, the provinces and the federal government very often will match those funds. But the Red Cross provides us with excellent record keeping and administration of how these funds are distributed, and it enables. And actually, they're agile. They can get the money out quicker than a provincial or the federal government could do. They get it more directly into the community, and they provide us with accountability for how those monies are being spent.
I'd add that there's no.
10:44 a.m.
I'd add that all this is in close collaboration. We're not working in a silo, actually. Minister talked about the the work with the federal government, but working with the provincial government and municipal governments in terms of who's eligible for assistance and so on is done very closely. And of course, we're accountable to those, both the public dollars, but also the donated dollars in these situations.
Thank you. Next question. Sorry. David Baxter, Global.
There we go. Yeah, good morning. This question is for Minister Blair. Minister, can you give us an update on where things are at in developing, flood insurance with the Insurance Bureau of Canada? Just looking at a new report from Intact today, they're estimating about $420 million in catastrophic losses due to disasters this year. Mostly fires, but we've seen similar situations where flooding would potentially cause that much in insurance losses. So where are things at on that front?
First of all, flooding is by overwhelmingly the most expensive insurable event that takes place across this country. But for the vast majority of people who live in a risky area, a high-risk floodplain, for example, they don't have access to any kind of a flood insurance program. So we've been, for the last 2 years, we're working very closely with the insurance industry through the IBC and other insurance companies in the development, and we've been working very closely with them in the development of a new national flood insurance plan that would provide Canadians with that utility. It's coupled with a number of other really important initiatives. For example, the flood risk mapping and the flood risk portal that's being developed by NRCan. And there are other related matters of insurance where Canadians also need access to earthquake insurance, et cetera. So we've been working very closely, as I said, with the industry. There's still some work to do, but there are a number of ways that we're looking at how we can reinsure or underwrite those highest risk properties. But it's also contingent upon people understanding their risk and taking the steps necessary to mitigate and manage and adapt to their risks. Like simply rebuilding into a high-risk flood area, for example, probably isn't the wisest investment. And I think by providing the utility of insurance for those properties and helping people identify their risks, people can make better decisions on how they build and where they build. And that work is ongoing. I anticipate, by the way, there's an urgency for this because the flood season each year impacts a significant number of Canadians. And so we are working very closely with the industry and over the next several months, hoping to bring forward some progress in the introduction of those insurance products.
Would that be end of the year you're hoping to be able to announce something, or would this be something that's not really announceable until that new floodplain mapping is done, since we don't really know exactly where the floodplains are lying?
The new flood, there's a number of converging initiatives that are rapidly working towards completion, and I would say in the next 9 to 12 months, we're hoping to be able to have announceables with respect to that.
Thank you. Next question, Jan Bailey.
$82 million is going to these 4 organizations here, or is it going to other organizations? And is $82 million enough, given the scale of the country, the scale of these disasters we're facing?
Well, $82 million, I think, builds a lot of capacity. We didn't sort of pull those numbers from the air. We've been working with the agencies and organizations as to what they need in order to do what we've asked of them. It's a fairly significant investment. We also, like each of the 4 organizations that are represented here today, and by the way, there are other community organizations that also benefit from some of these initiatives because all of our partners here also work with other community organizations. I know the Canadian Red Cross, for example, often supports other community organizations who are out doing very similar work and equally important work in partnership with them in the community. But the investment we're making, it's part of it. So far, we've invested, I think I mentioned $169 million in humanitarian workforce capacity program across the country. It's a significant investment, but it's coupled with the investments that Canadians make in supporting these organizations. And these organizations, they come with an existing capacity. And we're adding to that to increase their capacity and to increase their capabilities to serve Canadians. We think it's a very significant investment. I intend that we would continue to support them. And we are also going to undertake consultation to see if other community organizations can benefit from this type of investment, because we see in the types of emergencies that we've experienced across Canada, and I'll just give an example, in the Northwest Territories most recently, as a result of the flooding and fire events that took place up there, the United Way was the agency most able to provide support and assistance in that community, and so we made an investment in the United Way in the Northwest Territories. We see a number of other organizations who've been exceptional in first response to emergencies, things like Team Rubicon. And so there was also just important discussions that will take place with other organizations on how we can support them to support Canadians.
Thank you.
Next question, Davis Legree, iPolitics. No question. We'll go online. La première question en ligne,
The first question online is...
Bergeron, La Presse canadienne.
Oui, bonjour. Pour les organisations qui
Question.
sont,
Hello. For
ici pour le point de
organizations
presse, qui,
here today for the
qui
press
interviennent,
conference
dans le cas des feux de forêt,
and who are addressing the
juste avoir une idée
wildfire
de
situation,
comment se déroule
just trying to
le
get an
moral des
idea
troupes,
of
parmi vos
how
équipes.
morale
Ça
is
fait
among your
plusieurs
teams.
semaines, d'intervention, donc,
You've been addressing wildfires for a number of weeks now.
l'état de la situation là, sur le moral des troupes.
So I'd just like to hear you say a few words about troop morale. Answer. As for the Red Cross, I can say that it's been a challenging year due to the volume of activity first, and also due to the fact that, as I noted earlier, we don't know what the scale of activity will be going forward. So this year has come with challenges, and there's been a lot of demands on us. There's a lot of unpredictability regarding the volume of wildfire activity. And that's why today's announcement is important. Our experiences over recent years have shown that we need to increase our base capacity, our number of volunteers, for example, the number of our staff. This will let us address more and more frequent events. And this summer is a great example of that. So we're dealing with the current volume, but things can change, and we do need to adapt. Well, first, I'm going to take the opportunity to thank all our first responders on the ground. I'd also like to thank international firefighters who have played a key role in supporting and assisting community firefighters in Canada. Our agreements with the Canadian Armed Forces are concluding, but our soldiers will still be there for communities. If BC asks for increased assistance, we will be there for them. The same can be said for other provinces, so we will be there. We are ready to help. It will always be important to have the army on the ground. And our government will be there as well. We will be there, and we will work to support troop morale.
As a follow-up, Minister Blair, when is the funding going to be available to those NGOs, and for how many years, for what period of time?
Actually, the funding should be made available immediately, because the work has been ongoing, and so we make this announcement, but it has been a process of continuous funding. As a matter of fact, we actually had a bit of a challenge earlier this year, in that the funding lapsed, and we went and got interim funding so that we can continue to flow the necessary resources to our partners during that period of time, and now this is the announcement going forward. I apologize, I don't have the precise time frame for this. We'll get that information and get it out to you.
Thank you. Prochaine question. Next question, Éric Plouffe, Radio-Canada.
Est-ce que vous...
Question.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me?
Un, deux, deux. Parfait, merci. Excusez-moi, j'avais un problème avec
Good.
mon
Okay,
casque
sorry, I
micro.
had some
Ma
some
question,
trouble
c'est
with my
pour
mic.
les organisations qui
I have
sont
a question
présentes
for
à cette conférence de
the
presse. J'aimerais
NGOs
savoir comment
here.
ces sommes vont vous aider concrètement là, dans
What
les
I'm going
prochaines
to ask is,
semaines, les
how will
prochains mois.
this funding help you in concrete terms in the next weeks and months?
Merci, Monsieur Poff.
Answer. Thank you, Mr. Plouffe. For St. John Ambulance, it will help us boost our capacity. For example, the volunteer capacity. Volunteers will be assisting us during emergency events. Over the past few years, we have been working to boost infrastructure capacity throughout Canada. Now we're focusing more on human resources. We need to bring in new volunteers to address an increased workload. So we're at sort of a stage 3 now. We want to bring in more volunteers and be able to deploy them more rapidly. That will help us boost our coverage in Canada. This goes beyond the procedures we have and the equipment we have. We need to have people and we need to be able to deploy them quickly. Question. Well, exactly how are these volunteer recruitment programs going? Is it difficult to recruit volunteers these days? Answers. I'll answer for the Red Cross. The answer would be no. However, recruitment is not enough. You also have to train volunteers. They need to be ready. And they need to be trained continuously. As the Minister noted, we have had to significantly boost our capacity during COVID to support our operations. We were able to maintain some of that funding, and this will help to transfer towards permanent capacity. A little bit earlier, I noted that if maybe a decade ago, we would be dealing with a few exceptional events. These days, the volume is way up and our capacity needs to adapt. So we need more professionals, we need more training capacity, we need more volunteer teams. This summer, there will be a lot of people deployed. And this is just coming on the heels of Hurricane Fiona, which was one of our largest operations to date. So it is clear that events are becoming more frequent and more severe. And we need to boost our capacity to support municipalities, provinces, and the federal government. Question. So how's equipment going? Is that going well? Answer. Rather, how's recruitment going? It's going well. We have people, but we need to be able to train and deploy them. There will be no more questions.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I've just been advised that the funding announced today, $82 million, will be over the next 3 years. And the money will begin to flow as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Merci. This is concluded press conference. Thank you. Merci.